Good news and bad news regarding housing subsidies. The good news is they're available, and they can help struggling families find suitable, safe housing and help to end a cycle of eviction. The bad news, a waiting list possibly 10 years long, makes them very difficult to receive. I'm Erica Bryant, and this is the Tenants Toolkit, a 7-part mini-series created to help those who may find themselves facing eviction understand their rights and what they can do to stay in their home. Because if you're facing a housing-related crisis, you aren't alone. Here in Charlotte, rapid growth has created a shortage of affordable housing options, and the Tenants Toolkit is here to help. In this series, you'll receive a step-by-step guide to finding, budgeting for, and staying in your home long-term. This episode focuses on housing subsidies. As the eviction crisis continues in Charlotte, housing subsidies are becoming increasingly hard to come by, and the wait is often long.
I will tell you that they are hard to get, and so there's way more need than there is availability for housing subsidies.
The housing subsidies landscape is bleak right now, with the growing number of Charlotteans in need of subsidies, and very few are available. The most important action you can take after listening to this episode is to apply for a subsidy today due to this limited availability. For that very reason, we will focus this chapter on giving you more information about the types of subsidies available and how to apply. With the help of Isaac Sturgill from Legal Aid, we will also learn how subsidies play into your eviction rights. Now, let's get started.
So Legal Aid is a private nonprofit law firm, and we serve people who are low income and cannot afford legal counsel but that need attorneys.
Isaac plays an important role with his clients who need subsidies.
What my job is to try to help people who have housing subsidies keep their housing subsidies.
Let's begin by learning exactly what a housing subsidy is.
So a housing subsidy refers to a situation where the tenant is paying some rent based on their income. Usually that's going to be 30% of what their income is. And then the rest of their rent every month is paid by some type of government program typically.
We asked Isaac to break down exactly what that ratio looks like in an example.
A tenant may be renting an apartment where the contract rent or the market rent is $1,000 a month, but maybe 30% of that tenant's income is only $180 a month. So the tenant would pay the $180 a month, and then HUD would pay the rest of the $1,000 to the landlord.
In his example, Isaac mentions HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. It's responsible for the majority of housing subsidies extended to tenants. It's also important for you to understand exactly how you can qualify for a subsidy and what factors you will be evaluated on.
And usually that comes from HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Not all of them. There are some tax credit programs that provide some help with rent. There's also a Department of Agriculture has a rent subsidy program, but the majority of them are from HUD.
It's also important for you to understand exactly how you can qualify for a subsidy and what factors you will be evaluated on. Isaac offers you more insight into that process so that you know what to expect.
Yeah, you have to be under a certain income. So you have to be, if you make too much money, you won't qualify for the program, which makes sense because if you can afford rent on your own without a subsidy, then it should go to somebody that can't afford it. Typically, they will also do a criminal background check, and they will also do a credit check on the tenant. And that may determine whether or not the person's accepted. If they have recent convictions or criminal records, that may disqualify them, or if they have really, really bad credit, then that could be something that affects them as well.
Please make note that just because you are accepted onto a subsidy wait list, that does not mean you will still qualify later. For example, if you face a criminal charge a year before your name comes up on the list, you might be denied a subsidy. If you've been recently denied, please contact Legal Aid using the contact information at the end of this chapter.
if your name comes up and you get denied, most of them do have an opportunity to have a hearing for that, to challenge it. And you can go in front of a hearing panel and talk to them and try to, convince them and make your case as to why they should reconsider you. And that's actually something that legal aid helps with. We do a bunch of those every year where people are denied, and we go in and try to help them get that decision overturned.
Before we move on to the different types of subsidies available, let's pause and discuss something very important for you to know when it comes to the housing subsidy application process. Due to increased rates of subsidy candidates and decreased availability, you are looking at a wait time of 3 to 10 years.
The need far outweighs the supply.
So if you or a family member are in a situation where you need a subsidy, please make sure to apply today.
Definitely the people that are applying for it need it right away, but it's something where, again, you're in for a long wait before your name comes up for it.
Now, let's explore the different types of housing subsidies available in Charlotte so that you can get your application started. There are 3 types of housing subsidies we're going to learn more about: project-based voucher housing, Section 8 housing choice voucher, and project-based Section 8 housing. We will focus on the Section 8 housing choice voucher as it is the most popular type of subsidy in our community, though it is increasingly hard to come by. So exactly what is the Section 8 housing choice voucher, and why is it so popular?
The Section 8 housing choice voucher is a type of subsidy. And that one, people really like it a lot because it's portable. So it's kind of like a coupon that you can take to any private landlord. And if the landlord accepts it, then the HUD will start paying the landlord part of the rent directly. And then if you end up leaving that place, you can take it with you to another place.
Unfortunately, because this subsidy is so popular, this may be one of the longest waiting lists you will experience, and it is increasingly not available.
In Charlotte, that's administered by the Charlotte Housing Authority. That's the place people go to. They apply for it, and they maintain the waiting list. And I think the last time they cleared it, it took them 7 years to clear the waiting list. They reopened the waiting list after that for, I think, a week or 2 weeks. It may have only been 1 week. You could only apply online, and within that short frame of time, they got tens of thousands of people signed up for it.
Another thing to consider when signing up is making sure you have access to a permanent address where you can collect mail.
Well, and a lot of people that get on Section 8, they may be coming from situations where they've been homeless for a while. They may be coming from situations where they've been couch surfing. Definitely the people that are applying for it need it right away, but it's something where, again, you're in for a long wait before your name comes up for it.
If you or someone you know is on the waiting list for the Section 8 housing voucher subsidy, make sure that there is somewhere you can be reached, even if it's a family member's address, so you will not miss the notice and lose your place in line.
It's also a challenge sometimes, people move around, and so, if your name comes up and they send the information to you and you don't respond quickly enough, they'll move on to the next person. And so we do see situations sometimes too where people have been on the waiting list for a while, they don't pay attention or they miss the communication that goes towards them to tell them that their turn is coming up, and then they have to go to the back of the line again.
Lastly, it's very important to do your research on landlords who will accept a Section 8 housing voucher during the waiting process. There are very few landlords willing to accept these vouchers at this time. The unfortunate fact is that very few landlords are accepting subsidies, and the only way to combat this circumstance is to begin researching landlords today. This will allow you to have options in your back pocket when you receive your voucher, so you don't miss the window to secure housing from a participating landlord. Let's touch quickly on project-based Section 8 housing as well as project-based voucher housing, which was formerly referred to as public housing. Project-based voucher housing and project-based Section 8 housing refer families from their waiting lists to landlords to fill vacancies. The subsidy directly connects to the project unit available, and if you and your family move out of that unit, you will no longer have assistance.
And other subsidy programs like public housing are a different type of Section 8 that they call project-based Section 8, and that could be communities in Charlotte, to name a few, like Little Rock Apartments is one, Greenhaven Townhomes. There's a number of them here that are not maintained by the Housing Authority. There has to be a certain type of eviction notice that goes out.
Unlike the Section 8 housing choice voucher, you won't have many housing options to choose from with these types of subsidies and cannot go to a private landlord. However, you do receive slightly more protection from eviction. This leads us to our next big topic, which is tenants' rights for subsidy holders.
Yeah, tenants do receive some additional protections typically under these subsidy programs.
You must educate yourself about the type of subsidy you have so that you understand the additional rights you have as a tenant. If you understand these rights, you may be able to save yourself and your family from eviction. Isaac Sturgill explains.
So the main thing with housing subsidies that's key to remember for tenants is that you usually have some extra rights available to you. For example, most of the subsidy programs have an opportunity for some type of hearing, grievance hearing, or informal hearing before the case moves on to the eviction process. That's not true with all the subsidy programs, but it is for many of them. Most of the subsidy programs require a certain type of eviction notice to go out before the landlord moves forward with filing for an eviction. And some of the subsidy programs say that notice has to have certain language in it. It has to inform the tenants of certain rights that they have. And if the landlord doesn't provide the notice that's required, that's a defense that the tenant could use if it goes to court without the correct notice being given ahead of time.
Again, each subsidy program is different, so make sure to read the fine print on your lease or contact legal aid with any questions to avoid eviction.
But you also have some extra obligations that you need to be aware of.
Lastly, it's important to understand that with the added eviction protection comes more guidelines.
Under the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, the family, in addition to having a lease with the landlord, the family also has a contract with the housing authority that says that they're going to follow certain family obligations. There's requirements that they report certain things to the housing authority, like if their income changes, they have to report that right away. If they do receive eviction court papers, they're supposed to report that to the housing authority right away. So that's just one example of the reporting requirements.
The great news is that if you and your family understand your rights and your obligations, you may be able to keep your subsidy for a very long time.
There's not per se like a time limit on most of the subsidy programs. There is one subsidy program called the Family Self-Sufficiency Program that's supposed to have a 5-year limitation, but the majority of the subsidy programs, there's not a time limit. And there are some tenants that are able to, hang on to their voucher and stay in the program for a long period of time, for over a decade in some situations.
And finally, remember, if you are currently facing eviction and have a housing subsidy, legal aid is here to help you through the court and hearing process.
Most of the subsidy programs have an opportunity for some type of hearing, grievance hearing, or informal hearing before the case moves on to the eviction process. That's not true with all the subsidy programs, but it is for many of them.
We hope this episode gave you information you could use to navigate the subsidy system. If you need additional help, please reach out to the legal aid team at legalaidnc.org for free support.
Families that receive rental subsidies are a big priority for legal aid, and there's a really good reason why. And the reason why is, we're trying to protect people from homelessness.
Remember, stay informed, and you will have the best chance of receiving a subsidy if you need it and keeping your lease. Information is power, and it will help you protect your family. Special thanks to Isaac Sturgill for lending his perspective and expertise. For links to the resources mentioned in this podcast, go to thetenantstoolkit.com. In the next chapter of the Tenants Toolkit, rental contracts.
In the lease, it talked about repairs that needed to be done. Okay, you will be held responsible. And so she found it. She said, Miss Tiffany, it was on the 18th page. I said, well, how many pages was the lease? And she said it was like 27.
The Tenants Toolkit was made possible by the Charlotte Executive Leadership Council and Foundation for the Carolinas in collaboration with the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media. From Foundation for the Carolinas, producers are Hillary Crittenden, Jennifer Morlew, and Katie Koff. From the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media, this series was produced by Brian Baltashevitz, written by Pamela Escobar and Meredith Carter, engineered by Sarah Pollock, and edited by Kanata Edwards, and Elizabeth Egan.